Okie doke. It's good, Natasha. All right. Hello. Good evening. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good day to you, wherever you may happen to be. This is Tad. It is 1 o'clock in the morning here in California. I will be here for approximately the next hour reading from the dirty streets of heaven. Dirty streets of heaven. The dirty streets of heaven. I think I need more caffeine. I should have had a cup of coffee. Anyway, hello. Good to see you. Thank you for joining me. I will be reading soon. Before I do, just to bring you up to date on what's going on, Shay, Tad, and Deborah. The dogs are still moving forward. They are coexisting in the same room, except that we have Lemon on a tether because the Lemon, for those of you who might be tuning in for the first time, Lemon is the new dog. Johnny is the older dog. They are uneasy roommates at this point, but they're getting better. They're getting better. Lemon, unfortunately, now that she knows, or now that she feels she is safe and ensconced in a home, is beginning to exhibit some very distinct adolescent behavior. Lots of chewing, lots of jumping, lots of crashing into things, including Deborah, which is making Deborah a bit weary with the whole bully pit bull experience. She is a lovely pup, and she's sleeping through the night. This is the kind of thing you usually say about babies, but it's also true with dogs that had to learn to sleep it's not a crate in the normal sense because we've got this kind of wire thing. It's kind of a cage, but it's essentially a crate, but it's much more open than the one that we use to transport her out to the park or something like that when we take both dogs to the park. So, as a result, that things are at least a little more peaceful and a little more back to normal around the household. The trainer that we brought in, who we liked very much, basically said, Johnny, the older dog, needs to have his freedom, and she needs to have her freedom curtailed until she learns how to deal with things, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're doing. No fights at the moment. We have them both out in the living room or whatever at the same time, but I kind of built a little paddock, I guess, for Lemon with her tether, just so she and Johnny, because Johnny otherwise gets curious and he keeps going over to look at her and see, I don't know if we're torturing her or something. Or maybe he's over there hoping that we're torturing her, but whatever the case may be, we kind of set this thing up where I kind of put a bunch of furniture together and made a sort of a Berlin Wall to keep her in and keep him out. Although the Berlin Wall was more made to keep people in than to keep people out. But I suppose it served both purposes in a rather horrid way, of course. Anyway, so that's what's going on the dog front. Slow but distinct progress. On the other fronts, I am working, and when I can, I slide downstairs here, and but of course, I can't do that all that often because we're still very involved in the whole dog thing and many other things too. It's like tax preparation time and a zillion other things that have to be dealt with. But anyway, so when I can, though, I do slide down quietly, slip out and come down and write some pages. So the book is still moving forward. I have passed the 500-page threshold, which I was approaching, but I passed it today, actually. And I think I feel like, okay, it's beginning to feel like it has a book-type shape to it now. I think I've ironed out most of the issues. Not all of them. It's always an interesting process as you're writing a book. Trying to figure out what exactly it is that you're doing and what exactly it's turning into. There's a cat over my shoulder. Okay. Got it. It was just that the color looked wrong because he's actually quite an orange cat. I don't know if you can see him over here in the corner. And because he's out of the light or something, he's looking quite a different color. But anyway, their treat box is over here. You can't see it, but it's right over here. And I pour some treats into it. It's a box of all. If you're a cat owner, you may already know what these are, but it's basically a box with little boxes inside of it and lots of holes on the outside of it. And you put treats in it, and it keeps the cats busy. And it's always a good thing to keep the animals busy. Whether those animals are human beings or not, we all need to be kept busy in some way, shape, or form. Anyway, so anything else to relate? No, just, all the normal stuff that we normally do around here, which is fret about everything we're supposed to be doing and wonder if we'll ever get caught up, or in my case, realized a long time ago I will never be caught up. But so various other things. I'm getting a bunch of pages in that have to be signed, tip-in pages that have to be signed for a new edition, which is coming from Grim Oak Books, and our good friend Sean, who is a wonderful human being and who is putting out an edition of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, with all new art and things like that. Very cool. And of course, there was a British one that's been coming out as well. So I've told you about those. At some point, I'll bring them in just to show you. But anyway, so that's what's going on. Various other things, none of them having reached the threshold of announcement. And nothing I'm hiding from anybody. It's not like I've got some wonderful news. There's a few other things we're doing, but they're not really things that I am have anything to say about at this point. I think it's about it. God, I really feel it. Considering how busy I am every day and how many crises it seems like are going on at all times around here with dogs and cats and people and business stuff and phone conferences and blah, blah, blah. I never really feel like I've got much to report because I'm not going anywhere or doing anything. I'm just kind of cranking away at things that I can as much as possible. So, like I said, nothing exciting to report, but things are generally going well. Anyway, let me check in and see who might have showed up to say hello. And okay, so Chenoa is here. That's Chenoa Hopper Green. Great name. Mr. Unangst. There's my good friend Jerry. And hello, good to see you, Mr. Unangst. Isaac. Hello, Isaac. Good to see you too. Nikki. Nikki Chetwind, a pleasure. Kristen. Hello, my old faithful friend. Suzanne Owen is here. Ilva, my darling, who we're going to be seeing pretty soon, which is cool. So good to see you and looking forward to it. Rosalba, yeah, pleasure to have you. As always, Ivan, my good buddy. Hey, welcome aboard. Good to see you as always. Christina. Hello, Christina. Lovely to have you. Wouter, you too. Maria Jose, also good. Petra, as always. Hugely enjoyable to have you. Iris, thank you for being here. Chris Fobb, my hero. Good to see you, Chris. Sandra. Mark, that's Mark Redmond, but also Mark, that's Mark Craigbaum. And 3 more. So possibly, is that Christy Sanders? I can't tell. Anyway, but yes, Christy, I hear you and I hear what you're saying. I feel much the same, but I have promised myself over the years, over the last 4 or 5 years, that I will keep this a politics-free zone. Not because I am not very political and don't have lots to say, but I'll try to kind of keep that for my other social media stuff. And here I want to be inclusive and just invite people in and read. So, but I hear you. I hear you. It was a tough week. Anyway, and we'll get tougher. But as I've always said, we will muddle through and we will get through somehow, as long as we keep doing the right thing, all of us. Anyway, so I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I need to talk about. No, not really. I'm just, I'm working with The Splintered Sun, the book I'm working on now, and it's both very enjoyable and very frustrating because since I'm dealing with a slightly earlier period in the history of Ostenard, and I am also operating in Hernistir, primarily, although not entirely, because it's also, some of it takes place in what is in the later books called Erkinland, but at this point, at least in the first draft, is going by its original name, which is Earl King's Land. That's ERL, Earl meaning elf or elf-like, because the Scythi used to live there. Excuse me. So, but the interesting thing is that part of me is such a history buff, even with invented history. You know, I was one of those people who, when I was a kid, I was reading the appendices to the Lord of the Rings with huge attention and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm constantly struggling with the desire to cram even more history into the Splintered Sun, into the book I'm working on now, while of course also being very mindful that not everybody is quite, even a lot of the readers, as much as they enjoy it, there comes a limit at which, like, yeah, we don't need to know every single thing that ever happened in all of these places and to all of these people. But it's when I am working on things like this is when the history happens, because I begin thinking, well, what would the situation be like right now, or what would the general tenor of this particular society be like at this point? And that drives me back into my own writing, my earlier Ostenard work, but also into the other things that people have asked me or said to me, or that I have said in passing, and people have written them down to hold me to it later on, and things like that. So it constantly drives me into the invented history. And of course, when I'm inventing history, the first thing I want to do is cram it into the book and make everybody else suffer along with me, or no, to share it with other people who like invented history the way that I do. Because it is one of the most interesting parts of the whole thing. You're kind of sub-creating, to use the Tolkienian term, you're sub-creating a world. And everything has to have background, and it does. So you often have to figure it out. But that doesn't mean you always have to put it in the book. And that's always been, a tightrope that I've had to walk in my writing career, because I love that stuff so much. But I also obviously have to balance that off against readability. But it's particularly acute right at the moment because I am going back a couple hundred years. So there are things that could be talked about that are very pertinent to things that happen in the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn books, or in the Last King of Ostenard books. And there's all kinds of things that I want to work with. So it's really hard not to just sit down and start writing the entire history of that period from 200-300 years earlier than the Dragonbone Chair, and work out every single detail, including 99% of it that would never make its way into the book anyway. So that's one of my struggles at the moment. It's not much of a struggle. It's kind of a first world problem, but it's definitely part of the process of trying to write these kinds of books if you are this kind of tad, which I am. Guilty. Guilty as charged. I am exactly this kind of tad. I would also just like to mention, even though we are now have tipped over past the midnight hour, obviously, since it's after 1 o'clock here in California. But yesterday was my mom's birthday, so it has a lot of nostalgic and mournful significance for me. But also one of my co-workers and friends, I guess, Josh Starr at DAW. Last I heard, he and his wife were going to be expecting to give birth today. Josh is the person who basically puts the books together at DAW Books. So several other people who are here tonight are probably familiar with him and may have talked with him and emailed with him and all that. The people who helped me with the books. So I haven't heard any news yet or anything, but just when I last talked to Josh a week ago or so, he and his wife had a due date of March 1st. So I hope, if indeed they did give birth yesterday, that everything went well. And and it was a bit of a bittersweet. This is the third now the third year since my mom went. And, I'm glad somebody's having a baby today or yesterday or was supposed to. And, I know my mom, and I know she would have not just wanted to. I mean, she was very vitally interested in the next generations and the world going forward. And she was not anybody who ever was particularly wrapped up in her own self and her own importance, but was always very, very much focused on other people and inclusion. And our family was very much that way. It's like, if anybody had a friend who didn't have a place to go for the holidays, they came to us and stuff like that. And they were always hosting people from other countries and all that. So, it's been long enough now that although it's still painful to have lost her and my dad the next year, but it also gives me a chance to think back on all the really nice things she did, not just for me, but for all the people who knew her. So just wanted to mention that, and also give a shout out to Josh Starr and his wife, and hope that everything has gone well for them. So anyway, with that, I am going to start reading. And we are, of course, reading from The Dirty Streets of Heaven. And no, that is not the thing I want to read there. That is my note about a podcast I'm going to be participating in. Hang on just a moment. Okay. So, just to bring you up at least slightly to date with what's been going on, Bobby has tracked down something called the Magian Society, which apparently had some involvement with the guy who died, Edward Walker, but whose soul disappeared. This disappearance of souls, of which that was the first, but now there have been several, that has thrown both heaven and the euphemistically titled opposition into a state of frenzy. And Bobby, of course, is not merely caught up in that, but somebody is out to get him, although he does not know why, and out to get him to the extent of having sent a Sumerian demon called a Galu after him, Ghallu, although that's my arbitrary spelling, since, how you translate the language of ancient Sumer is a movable feast. So that's my particular version, although it is based on a real creature, demon, evil spirit out of Sumerian mythology. So anyway, so that's what's been going on, and this thing's already tried to kill Bobby once, if I remember correctly. I've read the book before, so I'm not always certain what things have happened in the reread yet. But anyway, so he found out that there is a connection between Edward Walker and the Magian Society, specifically a guy named Dr. Habari, who had been visiting him. So he has gone to the address and found that the Magian Society and Dr. Habari have packed up and left. But doing some research, he has discovered that the Magian Society's property out in the hinterlands of San Judas belongs to a big corporation under several shell companies, and the corporation is called Vald Credit, V-A-L-D, Vald Credit. And Vald Credit is a very big deal, and Kenneth Vald, its owner, is a kind of semi-Elon Musk-like character, although I wasn't by any means specifically thinking of Musk when I wrote it. I'm not sure how well I knew about Musk at the time, and I certainly had not as many negative feelings about him as I do at the moment. And that's one of the reasons why it's definitely a different person, because as we'll see, Kenneth Vald has some dubious connections. But anyway, so Bobby has gone off to investigate. He has left his car outside because he knows that the underground parking garage could be locked up easily. And he's going to go and basically do what he always does, which is shake things and see what falls out. So he's gone to a big office complex called No.5 Page Mill. So that's where Bobby is right now, and it also is a wraparound back to the beginning of the story, which you may remember, where he was being attacked by a vicious secretary. literally attacked and literally vicious. So anyway, I now continue with the book. The lobby of number 5, Page Mill, was pretty much what I would have expected. Workers streaming in and out, messengers with packages, maintenance guys trundling carts. A big guard desk dominated the front end of the lobby with 5 guys in uniforms. A smaller desk sat at the other end of the lobby, and everywhere I looked, I saw security cameras. I also noticed that they weren't letting anyone go through without an employee badge and a visual inspection. Even the bike messengers had to leave their packages at the desk, probably so they could go through an x-ray machine. Anyway, security was pretty darn tight. I loitered for a while as if I was waiting for someone, checking my watch from time to time, and wandered in and out of the sundries store that sold gum and cigarettes and checked that out too. Number 5 appeared to be your average office tower in most ways, although the employees seemed a little more reserved than what you'd usually see in a big company, more like the kind of vibe you'd expect from workers in a foreign embassy in an unfriendly city. Still, as I've mentioned, I was pretty hyped up, so I told myself I might be imagining things. Then something happened that I most definitely didn't imagine. A group of obvious security guys emerged from one of the service elevators in matching dark glasses, earpieces, and suits with gun bulges. The desk guards greeted them respectfully as they went past on their way to the main entrance. They obviously worked there and looked like the usual collection of muscle unleavened by sense of humor, but something about the one in front was extremely familiar, especially his unibrow and thick, close-cropped dark hair. He glanced in my direction without seeing me as he led his men through the front doors, and suddenly I recognized him, even in his people skin. He had just too much beast in his face to look 100% human. His hairline too low, his nose too wide across the bridge. It was Howling Fell, the guy who had been Grasswax's muscle the night Clarence saved the Martino lady from getting sent to hell. The guy whose neck I had sort of kneeled on. I watched him disappear out onto the sidewalk and decided that there was no way coincidence could be stretched that far. I definitely needed to learn more about Vald credit, and the best way might be paying a visit to the executive suite while Howling Fell and his security team were out of the building. I knew it wasn't the most subtle play, but as I may have told you, when I get stressed, I tend to drop back into old habits. I wanted answers, and failing that, I wanted people to know I was pissed. I decided my best bet would be the smaller guard station at the less used back entrance, where only 2 men were on duty. I stood around a few minutes more until one of the guards had gone off to the restroom. Then I walked up to the other just as he finished running his barcode reader over someone's badge. Excuse me, I said, but I think you'd better come look at this elevator. Something's seriously wrong. Someone could get hurt. He hesitated for a second, glancing around to see if his partner was coming back, but then grunted in a bad-tempered way and got up from his booth. He looked like he might have been an athlete about a decade ago, but he'd been sitting down too much since then. Which elevator? He said as he followed me toward the rear elevator bank, one hand resting on the butt of his taser in a very impressive way. This one, I said, punching a button. It opened and he peered inside. It was empty. What's wrong with it? He asked. Well, I said, pressing the barrel of my .38 against his spine, it's going to have your guts all over it in a second, if you don't get in. He grunted again, this time in shock. I nudged him forward. As the elevator door closed behind us, he said, "What the hell is I clocked him behind the ear with the handle of my revolver. The butt was rubberized, so I hit him pretty hard, and he slumped to the floor without another word, though I did my best not to cause permanent damage, on the slim chance he was an innocent patsy instead of an accredited hell minion, which was far more likely if this place was as important as I was beginning to suspect. I slipped his ID card into the elevator slot, pressed the 40th floor button, and we started up. I looked at his name badge, then took the walkie-talkie off his shoulder and keyed it on. This is Daly in the lobby, I announced, trying to sound like an excited $9 an hour. Somebody just ran out the back to the rear parking lot carrying a woman's purse. I think it's a robbery. I'm in pursuit. I keyed it off and attached it to his belt again. Luckily, no one was waiting for an elevator on the 40th floor. I dragged Daly down to the restroom, then into one of the stalls where I propped him up. I dumped his walkie-talkie into the toilet of the next stall so it wouldn't disturb his slumber, and also so he wouldn't be able to alert anybody too quickly if he came to before I left. I also checked to make sure he was breathing okay, just in case he turned out to be an actual person. Yeah, I'm that soft. I'm an angel, remember? And this is where you came in. I already explained what happened next. I reached the top floor of 5 Page Mill and encountered Vald's demon secretary, who flouted most versions of expected business etiquette by leaping across her desk and trying to rip me apart with her claws and teeth. I shot her twice in the face, which caused a lot of damage but didn't slow her down much. And I also broke her jaw so badly that it swung like a door coming off its hinges, but she was still coming after me. It was when she got me down on the floor and began trying hard to tear my head right off the body it belonged on that it became clear I was losing the fight. When you've only got seconds to live, you don't fuck around with etiquette. If you're fighting a guy, you hit him in the nuts as hard as you can. If you're fighting a she-demon who is wrapped around you like a constrictor and trying to bite off your face, and you can't reach anything else, you punch her in the tit. It caught her by surprise, just enough to make her rear back with a snort of rage, at which point I got my hand free, reached up and yanked hard at the strings of bloody flesh hanging from her wounded face, peeling them most of the way down. Thank goodness that even borrowed mortal bodies have nerves, because the pain was enough to distract her long enough for me to fight my way free. Panting and covered with blood. Some of it hers, but not all. I've had fights that made me feel better about myself. I scrambled my way back across the outer office as she lurched after me, still trying to locate me through the tatters of flesh blocking her vision. When she realized I must be trapped against the floor-to-ceiling window, she leaped toward me, arms wide and snarling, a faceless, hateful thing. I didn't want those red nails sinking into me again, so I shoved my gun against the plate glass and fired twice before I spun out of her way. The safety glass spiderwebbed, then leaped outward in a sparkle of little irregular pieces as she hit it and crashed through. I waited a few seconds, then leaned out into the cold air to check out the body in the tasteful silk power suit, lying motionless on a rooftop about 100 feet below. She was about as dead as demons get, or at least her real-world body was, and that was the part that would get me arrested. Shit, Bobby Dollar, I thought. What have you got yourself into now? It was way too late to turn back. I shouldered through the door to the spacious inner office, gun held high. I couldn't remember exactly how many times I'd shot the she-demon, and even if I was lucky, there couldn't be more than one bullet still left in the chamber. But I was damned if I was going to let anyone know that. Not that the man waiting for me looked very scared of my .38. He turned slowly away from the window, where he had been looking down at the remains of his secretary. Kenneth Vald was as handsome as a Spanish grandee out of a Velázquez painting. "So you couldn't make an appointment like anyone else?" he asked. Very funny. I moved sideways until I had his huge teak desk between him and me. He was maybe in his early 40s, at most, dressed in the casualest of business casual, a blue Lacoste polo shirt and khaki slacks, expensive loafers without socks. He was pleasantly tanned, had white blonde hair that was less sticky but just as impressively full as young Elvis's, and a neatly trimmed goatee. He looked like a talent agent who would represent the Hitler Youth. "What do you know about the Magian Society, Mr. Vald?" I asked him. He frowned just a little bit. "Just like that. Get you. You come in and kill my assistant. Do you know how long it takes to train a really good executive PA? Then demand information. Why should I talk to you? I'm sure you've arranged some little diversion, but it's only a matter of time until security gets here. Oh, and if you think you're going to scare me with that toy gun, well, go ahead. He pointed right to the alligator over his heart. Put a couple right there. See if it even slows me down while I twist your head off. He took a step toward his desk. I didn't want him getting anywhere near it, so I steadied my revolver. Fine, but if I shoot you in the face, at the very least it's going to ruin your weekend, Ken. And I have another even better reason you should behave yourself. Oh, and what might that be? Because I don't think you want everyone in Pandemonium to know about your connection to the Magian Society. I watched him carefully. I still didn't know if he was a sold soul or an actual paid-up member of the opposition, but his face gave nothing away. See, my guess is that you've got more than a few friends downstairs, Ken, and I don't mean in the lobby of number 5. Oh, and the Celestial City might be interested in your activities, too. So remember, if anything happens to me, they are all going to know because I arrange things that way. What? That old, if my lawyer doesn't hear from me, he'll go to the authorities wheeze. He looked me over for a long, speculative moment. Cute, he said at last. And what do you think this is going to get you, Wings? Oh, and what do you think this is going to get you? Wings? Because you must be an angel, or at least an X. Which, I confess, freaked me out a bit, because I'd never heard of such a thing as an X-angel, or at least not any new ones, since the fall. I was beginning to think this guy was no ordinary sinner. Listening too closely to what demons say is a famous rookie mistake, however, and whatever else I might be, I'm no rookie. Does it matter? I asked. I just want information. If you give it to me and it's real, then I'll walk away, and everyone's happy. Everyone? What about poor Holly? She was the pitcher on our company softball team. He took a few steps back toward the window and looked out and down again. Oh, the police are here. Looks like somebody noticed her body. He turned around and smiled at me. What's your name, Angel? Who is it I'm going to see dragged down to the deepest pits of Erebus? I'm not telling you my name unless you tell me yours. There are rules about these things, you see. But I don't care that much about you, really. I just want to know about the Magians. Now, hurry up, Ken. If your guards get here, you're going to be in more trouble than I'll be in, remember? He sighed and shook his head, then spread his arms in a gesture of amused resignation. Something I can only call an aura of power began to radiate from him, strong as the heat of the sun on a hungover morning, strong enough to make my eyes blink and my head ache. The master of 5 Page Mill was golden and self-assured as a lion on the veldt. Tell you my name? You mean you really don't know? Do you think that if you find out, you'll wield some kind of control over me? He laughed like he was truly enjoying himself, as if I had shown up just to please him. I'm Eligor the Horseman, you wretched upstart, one of the Grand Dukes of Hell. Oh, shit. That was all I could think, over and over like a skipping CD. Oh, shit, oh, shit. Eligor was one of the really big ones. I had tossed in my little baited hook, and I had snagged Leviathan. I fought beside the Lightbringer at the walls of heaven. His voice seemed to get louder with every moment. I was cast down when he was cast down. I have shared his exile since the beginning. But you're nothing. A fly. With that, He began to grow, shadows of both glaring light and total darkness stretching around him, his face blossoming into something grotesque and horrifying beyond description until he towered above me, crowned in flames and cloaked in shadow, and the room itself seemed shrunken to the size of a grave. "And do you know what else?" His voice pressed in on me from all sides, louder even than my heart's blood as it rushed through my veins. "I don't believe your story, little angel. I don't think you've made any arrangements at all. No, I'd guess you're the improvisational type, that you're here by yourself, without any backup plan at all. And that's how you're going to die, too, alone." He stretched out his hand toward me. I couldn't move. Dimly, through the thundering of my arteries, I could hear the guards banging on the office's outer door, breaking in. But I couldn't turn, couldn't see anything but Eligor's triumphant, terrifying face. Chapter 14. Friends in Low Places. Eligor's long, icy fingers wrapped my head. Again, I was in the presence of something that could tear my mortal body apart like bread dough, but this time it had already caught me. The founder of Vald Credit lifted me at arm's length until my feet were kicking several inches above the floor and my neck felt like chewed taffy. "Go ahead," I told him, determined not to go out begging. It probably sounded a lot like "Brrr," since his hand was crushing my features into a shape they weren't meant to take. "Kill me. Kill me." "Oh, definitely. Sooner rather than later." He smiled. There were sharp things in his mouth that didn't even look remotely like teeth. "But first I'm going to call up a couple of hard, pipe-hitting Nergalis, and we're going to go to work on you until we find out who you are and why you came storming into my office with this Magian Society bullshit." Still dangling me in midair like a prized trout, he muted his glamour and shrank back to looking like Kenneth Vald once more. But his eyes remained distinctly goat-like, pus yellow with horizontal slots for pupils. This was about as bad as things could get. Eligor may not have been Old Scratch himself, but he was high in the hellish nobility, with strength and abilities to match. They don't really have a firm hierarchy down there, but I couldn't kid myself. He was a member of the all-star team, and I was one of heaven's lowliest benchwarmers. The demon lord fluttered the fingers of his free hand, and the nearer office door abruptly sprang open. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw half a dozen or more armed guards dressed like SWAT commandos tumble through and into the office. One was so surprised by the door's sudden unlocking that as he fell, he discharged his M4 with a deafening rattle. Bits of ceiling rained down around us for several seconds as the guards scrambled to their feet and surrounded me with a ring of automatic weapons, although it seemed scarcely necessary, since I was still hanging helplessly in midair and no threat to anything except my own dry underwear. Several of the plainclothes security guys shoved in after the armored men. The leader of these had his gun in one hand and a phone in the other. It was Howling Fell. "Boss," he said. I mean, Your Grace, we got a problem." "I've got the problem right here," said Eligor, bouncing me gently up and down. I swear I could hear my neck vertebrae popping like popcorn. "I want you to get me some of those nasty Shar-e-Sutuk fuckers who like to play with needles and fire. We're going to find out who this little winged rat is and who sent him." "Oh, shit," said Howling Fell. "I think I know that guy." He pushed his way through the ring of guards and got right up in my face, standing on tiptoes so he could examine me as I struggled in Eligor's unbreakable grip. Even in his human body, he was no prize. Not only was he ugly, he had breath like rotting dog food. After a moment, he showed his teeth in a tongue-lolling grin. Yeah, that's Bobby Dollar. I met him a couple of times. He's one of those advocates. If he remembered me, I was pretty sure he also remembered my foot on his windpipe. I smiled back, then spat at him, hoping he might go for me despite his boss's presence and accidentally kill me. This definitely seemed like one of those situations where dying had to be better than the alternative. But although the gob of spittle landed on his cheek, Howley never had the chance to do anything but step back, because suddenly Eligor roared like a wounded lion and flung me to the ground. Bobby Dollar, his master bellowed. You mean this is Deloriel, the little pimp who stole from me? This shit was just getting worse and worse. So that thing I was supposed to have, but didn't actually possess, belonged to one of the Grand Dukes of Hell? To the same archdemon who had just captured me with the ease of a man scooping up an escaped hamster, and had decided to set some sadistic Middle Eastern demons on me before he even knew who I was? This was just fucking peachy. Tell me where it is, punk. Right now. Eligor leaned down and yanked me back into the air, this time with hands clamped on each arm, and held me in front of his face. He smelled a lot better than Howling Fell, but for a moment I could see into the endless abyss behind those black slot eyes, and it nearly stopped my heart. Eligor wasn't Hell's only Grand Duke, but there aren't many, and they are all horrifyingly dangerous. Like the stupid dick I am, I had started a bar fight with a stranger who turned out to be a world heavyweight champ. If you tell me right now, he said, maybe I'll just peel your face off and let you live like that for a while, chained to my desk. I can bring it to you. I swear I can, if you let me go. Otherwise, you don't get shit out of me. Oh, I'll get everything out of you, you little winged pimple. The demon lord was having trouble keeping his Kenneth Vald face on. It was rippling as if it might get too hot and just melt away. The experience was a bit like sitting in the control room of a nuclear power plant in mid-disaster. Fascinating, in that you only get to watch something like that once in your life, and it's probably going to be the last thing you'll ever see. Sweat, blood, shit, and piss to begin with, Eligor snarled. Oh, a lot of blood. Then eventually every cell of your body will slowly be turned into liquid and squeezed out onto the floor of my recreation room. He dropped me again. I fell hard, but managed to crawl back up onto my knees. Might as well die with my head above floor level, I figured. Don't ask me why, it just seemed better somehow. But, Master, said Howling Fell, you can't. I mean, not now. Vald Eligor turned toward him, head pivoting slowly like a king cobra gauging optimum striking distance. I can't? Howling Fell went pale and began squirming. I thought he was going to throw himself on the floor beside me and show Eligor his belly. No, it's because of the cops. There's about 40 of them down in the lobby. He waved his phone. They said there's a fugitive up here. They must have meant this Dollar guy. He's wanted for murdering Grasswax, the prosecutor. I mean, Gratzuvach. They were afraid he might have taken you hostage. It was all I could do to get them to wait 5 minutes and let me and my men check things out. Eligor snorted. Cocksuckers. As if some minor leaguer is going to... He shook his head in irritation. Look, just tell them we killed the little shit already and they can come pick up the body. Pretty soon. That'll give us time to... Astonishingly, Howling Fell interrupted. He had bigger balls than I thought, although judging by the look on Eligor's face, he might not have them for long.
But it's been more than 5 minutes, Master. They're already on the way up. Talk to the guy in charge of them, Your Grace. He won't listen to me. Give me that fucking phone.
Eligor reached out and snatched it from Howling Fell's hand.
Is someone there? This is Kenneth Vald speaking.
Officer, I don't know who you are, but I demand you contact Deputy Chief Bryant, and he'll tell you. He paused for a moment.
Bryant? That's you? What the hell is going on? How dare you enter my building without...
There was another kind of anger in his voice now, and for at least this moment he had forgotten about me. I stared blearily around the room, but didn't see any immediate hope of escape. My revolver, which might or might not have been empty, had fallen to the ground when the Grand Duke grabbed me, then had been kicked aside somewhere by one of his guards. Unlike the window in the outer office, the one in here was still whole, and without a gun, I had doubts I could break the safety glass, even if I could somehow get through the ring of guards pointing their assault rifles at me.
What do you mean you're outranked? I don't care.
Duke Eligor was beginning to look a bit bothered. His hair and whiskers were still the same pale, pale gold, but his skin had gone the color of new brick.
Well, screw you and your higher authority, Bryant. I'm going to cut the little bastard to pieces, and you can have what's left when you get there. So? I don't care if this is a public frequency. Anyway, who's even going to know if you tell them the guy was already...
He frowned, listening, then pointed at Howling Fell.
Go look out the window.
The minion went to the window.
What do you want to know?
Are there guys with sniper rifles and cameras on the roof of the courier building? Eligor asked. Looking in the window here?
Yes, Master, Howling Fell said. A lot of them. Do I have to keep standing here? What if they think I'm him?
Eligor raised the phone again.
Who did this shit to me, Bryant? Because that's a pretty damn big coincidence. I want a name.
His slotted eyes narrowed.
Oh, really? All right, you can take the suspect. Bring your men in and I'll have my boys stand down.
He clicked off the phone and turned to Howling Fell. His expression could have removed paint from a battleship hull.
We're going to let them have him. Too much shit to clean up otherwise.
Howling Fell scuttled over. As he dragged me up off the floor, he gave my arm a not too friendly squeeze, just to let me know he remembered our previous meeting. I swear the bones squeaked as they rubbed together.
But if you want to question him, Master, can't we just take him outside? Then you'll have all the time you want. As long as he's alive and still breathing when we turn him over to the cops.
Eligor cursed, or at least that's what I assume he did. I couldn't understand the words, but at the sound of his sharp exclamation, a wind suddenly rose that made the windows shudder, and several of the papers on his long teak desk caught fire.
Did I advertise for stupid? Because that's the only way you could have been the top candidate.
He glared. Howling Fell cringed.
You can't take one of our kind out of time unwillingly without turning the whole apple cart upside down. That's a major breach of the conventions. It'll set off alarms from the top floor of creation down to the basement. Alert his overlords and mine, and probably start a war. Do you think that's a good idea, you fucking idiot? Do you? No, Master.
I would have sworn the security chief was about to urinate submissively.
And you, Angel, said Eligor, turning to me, don't think you're safe even with the police. You can guess how many friends we've got in prison.
He laughed, but he sure didn't sound happy.
You've got something of mine, and not only am I going to get it back, You're going to suffer like you never even imagined suffering. You thought you could treat Eligor, the horseman, like some kind of street bitch, did you? I'll see you again, real soon." And before I could even reply to any of his charming promises, he kicked me in the balls and then in the head as I crumpled forward, sending me somewhere that even angels go if you hit them hard enough. I won't bore you with the details of being dragged across the San Judas Hall of Justice parking garage, half stupefied, handcuffed, and throbbing painfully between my legs, then being tossed into a holding cell to wait, bruised and bloody, without benefit of either a lawyer or medical attention. Stronger than normal body or not, I was in a world of serious hurt. About half an hour later, when I was able to sit upright on my own without puking, 2 SJPD officers came and led me to the booking desk. The cops there might as well have been processing a shadow. They barely looked at me, spoke to me only enough to direct me through the required photos and fingerprinting, then dumped me back into the holding tank. It was odd that I had a cell to myself in the middle of the day, when the San Judas County Correctional System was so notoriously overcrowded. It was also strange that someone being arrested for a newsworthy murder should have been walked into the Hall of Justice without a single reporter present, especially when a police tactical squad had been staked out on the roof of the San Judas Courier, a building full of journalists, while everything went down right in front of them in the penthouse office of one of the richest men in America. At first I had been relieved just to be alive and out of 5-Page Mill Square, but I was beginning to wonder if I had simply been helped out of the frying pan and into something a little warmer. Not to mention that my groin and my head still ached so miserably from Eligor kicking me that it felt like the best possible solution would be separating the 2 wounded areas as far as possible, by decapitation. I banged on the door and demanded a lawyer or a telephone call. Of course, they'd confiscated my phone, but was thoroughly ignored. At last, just when I was imagining they'd have to feed me something soon and wondering if I could hold it down, a quartet of cops in full riot gear came in to get me. Somebody had apparently decided I was dangerous, which was precisely why I went with them like the sweetest lamb you ever saw. Never do anything expected is my motto, especially when you don't know how much trouble you're in, which I didn't, except I knew there was a lot of it. Eligor, one of the opposition's major beasts, thought I'd been stealing from him, and somebody with even more clout than Eligor had just had me arrested. Oh, and in case I didn't explain earlier, those zippers we angels use don't lead anywhere except out of normal time, so you're still in the same place. I wasn't getting out of jail that way. The cops led me across the facility to a part I'd never seen before. Yes, I've been in the Hall of Justice a time or two. None of your business is the next answer. It was an interrogation room, but although there was a single heavy steel table bolted to the floor in the center, there were no two-way mirrors for observation, nor in fact anything on the walls at all, except an old poster about how to perform CPR. The walls themselves were chipped and pitted, the paint scraped away in spots by what might have been fingernails, which didn't bear much thinking about. I decided a few off-the-record interrogations might have taken place there back in the day, or maybe even earlier that week, and my stomach began to curl up into a hard knot. I was wordlessly directed to a folding chair on one side of the metal table. Then the cops retired to the back wall, inscrutable as robots in their plexiglass face masks and helmets, and for about 3 or 4 minutes we all just waited in silence. I spent the time imagining impressive ways to escape, but I knew that none of them would work. I'm pretty tough, but I'm not going to beat 4 cops with body armor, tasers, and batons if they've had any training, especially not after the punishing way Kenny Vald and the Galoo had knocked me around recently. Suddenly the door opened and the cops all straightened a bit, although they had been pretty much at attention already. The tall, dark-haired woman who walked in was not someone I immediately recognized, though she had one of those semi-familiar faces I felt I ought to know. She was maybe in her early 50s, wore a very boring, very serious dark business suit, and had a handsome, intelligent face with a strong nose. "Robert Dollar?" she asked, looking down at a sheaf of papers in her hand, then up at me as if I was different than what she'd expected. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "At your service." "Spare me anything cute, Mr. Dollar." She slid into the chair across from me, then handed me a package of wet wipes. "Clean yourself up. I'm Congresswoman Jennifer Pt.9, and you are a lucky man." "Tell that to my scrotum, Representative," I said. My face was stinging as I wiped away the dried blood, and I was tired of playing Mary's little lamb. "Because the bastard on the top floor of the Vald building kicked me there pretty hard, and no matter what any of his thugs or the SJPD said, I didn't do anything wrong. Unless you objected to killing demons, of course, but I was relying on Eligor to clean up the mess I'd made of his secretary. He didn't want publicity, and he didn't want me in jail. He'd made it clear he had more personal plans for me." "I hope that's true, Mr. Dollar," she said, "because somebody has gone very, very far out on a limb for you. You are no longer just an ordinary smart-mouthed irritation. You have become an extremely high-priced favor, the biggest I've ever done." Who had that kind of clout? A sudden thought made my stomach flip-flop. "You're not handing me back to Kenneth Vald, are you?" A cold stare. "Mr. Vald is no longer involved with this matter, and in a moment I won't be either." "I really have no idea what you're talking about." "That's good, too," the Congresswoman said, "because after you leave here, you're going to completely forget any of this ever happened, and that most definitely includes this little chat." She shot me a hard, unpleasant look. "You and I have never met. Remember that." I'm leaving? When I walk out of this room, the guards will walk out behind me, Mr. Dollar. You will then wait until you have counted to at least 100 before you follow. The door will be unlocked. If you turn left and walk to the elevator, it will take you down to the employee parking garage. There are a number of exits from there. Once you leave this property, I will no longer know or care what happens to you. Clear? I was beginning to remember more things about Congresswoman Pt.9 now, and one of them was that she wasn't just an ordinary politician. She had seats on some of the most important committees in Washington, and if the Democrats got back in control, she was the horse some people were backing to finish in the money, either as House Whip or even Speaker, all of which made me wonder who had the muscle to bend her. Still, only an idiot would have been counting the teeth on this particular gift horse. "All clear," I told her. "Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much." "Right." She pushed my phone and my empty revolver across the table to me. "Then our business is done." As I holstered my gun and slipped the phone into my pocket, she stood and gave the cops behind me a look. They shuffled past me, all that gear rattling, as they followed her out the door. Well, I thought, this is definitely some weird shit. I counted to 100 and then headed for the door, half expecting to find it locked and the whole thing some bizarre, infernal prank. A bit of morale stomping before they got down to interrogating me properly. But the door was open, and the hallway outside deserted. I tried to look as much like an unhurried and innocent person as I could, but it didn't seem to matter. The couple of other civic employees I encountered barely glanced at me, although I must have looked like I'd lost a fight against a guy with a snow shovel. Same thing in the garage. Cars rolled past me without the drivers even looking hard. A parade of stolid-looking cop types in their civilian rides, SUVs, and sedans that looked like unmarked police cars. Instead of coming out instead of coming out on Broadway, I went up the stairs on the Marshall Street side. It was dark, the lamps hung with carnival bunting for the upcoming parade, the streets busy with people leaving work, but I still hoped I could find a cab without having to stand around too long in the open. I was very conscious that my gun had no bullets in it. As soon as I reached the curb, though, a long black car pulled up alongside me, and the passenger side window slid down. The passenger seat was empty. Nervous, as you can well imagine, I leaned down to peer into the dark interior and saw a shadow behind the wheel and a hint of hair as pale and shiny as Karael's armor. "You are very predictable, Mr. Dollar," the Countess said from the driver's seat. "I suggest you climb in before someone notices you. No, the back, not the front." And that's where we're going to stop. So, that is it for tonight's reading. And as always, I am very pleased to have shared some time with you and grateful for your presence. And, excuse me, I will continue with the adventures of Mr. D at 7 p.m. later today, much later today since it's only 2 in the morning now. But until then, or until the next time that I see you, wherever and whenever that may be, I ask you to take very good care of yourselves because you are necessary and you are important. Not just to me, but I know for a fact that you are important to others as well. And while you're doing that, take good care of your loved ones, your family and friends. Keep an eye out for those who might need a helping hand here or there. And of course, peace. And I wish everybody here a wonderful week coming up. And I will see you very soon. So thanks for joining me. Be good. Be well. Ciao, bambini.